Okay, so here's what I said today, and I stand by it. It would seem the primary hysteria that to be worried about right now are, I guess I should have said, is elected officials chomping at the bit. I know people try to correct me that it's champing or spelled champing. That's kind of an anachronistic spelling that's more associated with British pronunciation of English, just for any of the pedantic people out there who want to correct me on that. Chomping at the bit to attribute the drone sightings to the typical cast of scary foreign adversaries in hopes of whipping up a war fervor and or funding more military industrial expenditures. So it might be too late for this NDAA bill that's currently going through the Congress, as usually happens every December. If the House passed its version last week, and the Senate has to take up their version, and they'll go to a conference committee and try to come up with the bicameral bill. Although I wouldn't rule out that even in these waning weeks of this congressional term, somebody could slip in some provision to the NDAA to fund something that they say is needed for anti-drone surveillance or whatever. Actually, that now that I think about it, that's pretty probable because the bill is not in its final draft yet, even though the House passed its own version. So who knows? But let's go to what Chris Smith, who is the Republican congressman from New Jersey, had to say yesterday afternoon or morning when he convened a big press conference with his local law enforcement partners and local elected officials. Now, Chris Smith, just if people don't know, not that it's totally relevant, but like he's one of the most long-serving members in the entire House. He's been in office since 1981. So he's been there for 44 years. He got elected when he was, I think, only 28. So he could easily be around for another 20 years. So we could have somebody who's, if he reaches the high end of the longevity spectrum in Congress, which is not unfathomable, he could be there for potentially 70 years. Because he's not that old yet. I think he's only 70, 72, something like that. Anyway, I only say that because over the course of his long and illustrious career, he's never met a military kind of boondoggle he didn't like, or a foreign entanglement that he didn't want to gin up support for. So it's not surprising to me that he's out there at the fore, making the most alarmist possible proclamations around this subject. Again, obviously there's something here that people are observing. But then there's another layer added on top of the story where you have interested parties with a political agenda of some sort, like Chris Smith. Number one, trying to use it as a partisan cudgel against the Biden administration, which, okay, fair enough. And then number two, using it to kind of bolster this sort of long-standing preoccupation he has with fighting foreign adversaries. So this could easily be used, and it already is, it seems, to advance long-standing American geopolitical interests, or at least interests as far as Chris Smith sees them.
And just remember, ladies and gentlemen, the feckless response to the Chinese Communist Party's spy balloon. When that thing traversed America and went over one very sensitive base, including the B-2 bombers base, after another. We did nothing except say, oh, it's a spy balloon. Or is it? Or is it a weather balloon? I still can't get over that one. The elusive maneuvering of these drones, I would suggest a major military power sophistication that begs the question whether they have been deployed to test our defense capabilities, or worse, by violent dictatorships, perhaps maybe Russia or China or Iran or North Korea. I mean, they have the capability, and they certainly have the motive. The Pentagon has said the drones are not ours. I've written Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin asking the Pentagon to authorize the use of force to down one or more of these unmanned threats to uncover the mystery. Bring them down over the ocean, over an area where there's no population. Bring them down and find out who's doing it. Knowing that drone warfare has radically changed warfighting in Ukraine and Russia, the Middle East, and elsewhere, this is not the time to trivialize or dismiss the threat.
Okay, so Chris Smith is saying that the sophistication of the drones indicates that there's some very sophisticated military force behind them. Now, here's the hysteria that I'm talking about. Here's the hysteria that people should be discounting and dismissing, or at least heightening their skepticism of, rather than like going around trying to tell individual citizens that they're in the throes of hysteria or they're not seeing what they're seeing. How about focusing on the potential dangers of this form of hysteria, which is a member of Congress going out and telling the public through this speculative rhetorical phrasing that he kind of frames as factual, although he has no firm factual basis for saying any of it. He's just inferring somehow that the alleged sophistication of the drones, and I don't know how sophisticated they are if everybody can see them. Like, wouldn't a really sophisticated drone be evading detection, right? Would a really sophisticated drone have some of the lighting schemes that are actually associated with, as I understand it, FAA regulations? So how sophisticated could they be? I don't know. Either way, though, for him to be going out and making these pronouncements that he clearly has no evidentiary basis for, and if he does, he should share that basis, which he hasn't. That's fomenting a certain kind of hysteria. And that's a potentially dangerous hysteria, because if he can kind of confect a narrative around this, and I'm sure there will be plenty of other people who are more than willing to join in, that says our skies have been invaded by nefarious foreign actors. I mean, do I have to spell it out for you in terms of how that could be cited to mobilize a potential war posture or a military reprisal of some sort? Remember, many members of the incoming Trump administration, including Trump himself, have called for stuff like, or threatened, bombing Iran to smithereens. That's Trump's words. Trump called for bombing the entire country of Iran to smithereens, or he threatened, he called for that to be threatened against Iran. You have the incoming CIA director. Maybe I should pull this clip up. You have the incoming CIA director, John Ratcliffe, who has already claimed. Give me 1 second. You have the incoming CIA director, John Ratcliffe, already claiming, a few months ago now, that Iran has committed acts of war against the United States by, number one, allegedly hacking Trump campaign emails. That's a whole another incident that was very bizarre. And the media didn't even report these materials that we were told they had received from Iranian hackers, because they were so frozen into inaction by their desire to avoid abetting a foreign interference scheme. So it was like 2016 Redux, except now it's Russian. Instead of Russian interference, it was Iranian interference, and it benefited Trump presumably to not publish these materials that we were told had been hacked from Trump campaign servers or something. And then also Ratcliffe says that Iran has further committed an act of war against the United States by allegedly plotting to assassinate Trump, although Ratcliffe is much more conclusive in his language. So This guy is about to run the CIA. There's no controversy whatsoever virtually about his nomination, unlike a handful of others that Trump has nominated. So he's very likely to sail through the Senate with no issue. And if now this drone incursion, quote unquote, or whatever you want to call it, could serve as like an additional plank in a potential argument that might be made for military reprisal against Iran, which the Wall Street Journal reported a few days ago, the Trump administration or Trump transition people are at least considering options in relation to, then that's all the more reason why to push back on hysteria coming from the elected officials and not directing the opprobrium at ordinary people who are just relaying what they think they see in the sky. So just to remind you, here's what Ratcliffe said. This was, I think this was in September. Yeah, September.
It's no secret that that the Democrats want to obtain a ceasefire in advance of the presidential election coming up to help Kamala Harris, and in so doing, they're really willing to put politics above our national security. And it is troubling, Maria, because how far are they willing to go? Well, they're, as you point out, they're willing to ignore acts of war. I mean, when our own intelligence community tells us that they're hacking into the Trump campaign to help Kamala Harris win the election, when they engage in an act of war of trying to assassinate President Trump, and perhaps most importantly, when they engage in the act of war of firing through its Houthi-controlled rebels ballistic missiles at 3 U.S. warships, and there have been no actions and no consequences to those acts of war by Iran, it unfortunately tells you how far the Democrats are willing to go to stop Donald Trump.
Okay, so I forgot about another claim that he made about a supposed act of war that Iran has committed against the U.S. He's saying that the alleged hacking of the emails, the alleged assassination plotting against Trump, and then also the furnishment by Iran of the Houthis with missiles that have been used against U.S. sea craft. Those are already 3 arguments that Iran has committed an act of war against the United States. And the Democrats are weaklings, according to Ratcliffe, the incoming CIA director, for not yet taking strong enough action in reprisal against Iran. And so, there's a groundswell, potentially, maybe groundswell is the wrong word, but there's a coalescence of an argument here among people who comprise Trump's senior-most sort of orbit to potentially launch action against Iran. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm just saying that the underpinnings of the argument that might be proffered are clearly here. And Ratcliffe articulated it. So if that argument could potentially be further bolstered by saying, on top of all these other alleged acts of war, Iran is somehow responsible through some cockamamie means of infiltrating the American airspace and putting drones in the vicinity of, even over potentially, military installations in the U.S., you could see how that could be marshaled in further into this argument that some people in Trump's orbit, including Trump himself, have been making about Iran's commission of hostile acts or even acts of war against the United States, and how it's necessary for there to be some full-throated retaliatory measures. So that's something to be mindful of. If you want to reprimand people for hysteria, reprimand people who want to use this episode to further objectives like the one that Ratcliffe just spelled out there. And now we're going to go to Jeff Van Drew, because he is a piece of work. A lot of you probably already saw this, but I'm going to replay it because I feel I must. If I could find it. I thought I had tweeted it. Maybe not. Okay, here we go.
In focus now, Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, member of the House Judiciary Committee on the Hill right now. How do you address this at this point?
Well, here's the real deal, Harris.
Get ready. Here's the real deal, straight from Jeff Van Drew. I love that preface. I'm not going to give you any more BS. I'm going to tell you the real deal. So buckle your seatbelts.
I'm also on the Transportation Committee, on the Aviation Subcommittee, and I've gotten to know people. And from very high sources, very qualified sources, very responsible sources.
If they're so qualified and responsible, why can't you tell us who they are? Like, why is there a identification secret? Like, shouldn't we all know who is asserting what's about to be asserted here by Jeff Van Drew? Like, these people are using him as their conduit, it seems, to make these wild claims about the alleged origin of the drone incursion. But let's hear what the rest.
I'm going to tell you the real deal. Iran launched a mothership probably about a month ago that contains these drones. That mothership is off. I'm going to tell you the deal. It's off the east coast of the United States of America. They've launched drones, is everything that we can see or hear. And again, these are from high sources. I don't say this lightly. Now, we know there was a probability it could have been our own government. We know it's not our own government because they would have let us know. It could have been.
So we know it's not our own government because they would have let us know. Okay. I don't know whether it's the U.S. government or not, but the idea that it's impossible that some faction within the military or the security state or the intelligence services couldn't have had any role in what we're seeing now because they would have politely informed us if that was the case. That's hilarious.
Some really glorified hobbyists that were doing something unbelievable. They don't have the technology. But let's pretend that's possible. The third possibility was somebody, an adversarial country, doing this. Know that Iran made a deal with China to purchase drones, motherships, and technology in order to go forward.
Okay, so Iran made a deal with China to purchase motherships. Maybe they did. Can I see like the contract or the terms of whatever deal he's asserting there? Like, can we get it? Don't these people ever feel obliged? Like, if I was a member of Congress and I was going to make a very alarming claim that could have huge ramifications, I might feel like slightly obliged to substantiate what it is I'm saying with facts and evidence. So I don't know if there's this deal or not. There could be, but like maybe provide it so people can not just have to take your word for it as somebody who happened to get elected from a district in southern New Jersey, and therefore you're this authoritative voice that we all just have to nod and solemnly accept the wisdom of. That's an idea.
Forward. The sources I have are good. They can't reveal who they are because they are speaking to me in confidential.
Why can't they reveal who they are? And why are they speaking to you in confidentiality? Why don't they go haul them before a committee in Congress? Put them on Fox instead of you. Like, why are they confidential? There's no follow-up. Of course, the Harris Faulkner on Fox does not ask any follow-up to get him to provide any additional detail that should illuminate why these people are speaking in confidentiality.
These drones should be shot down, whether it was some crazy hobbyist that we can't imagine, or whether it is Iran, and I think it very possibly could be, they should be shot down. We are not getting the full deal, and the military is on alert with this.
Look, you've given us some pretty dire information just here, and I want to make sure that our viewers are digesting this. Iran has the capability to pull up along our eastern seaboard and launch drones the size of an SUV into the skies of several states, particularly New Jersey, where we know the incoming president has a large home, also in the same county or nearby where some of these drones in New Jersey have been seen.
Okay, so I think Van Drew slightly walked back. That's the political punditry term. slightly walked back his claim and kind of modified the certitude with which he was conveying that he knew this information in subsequent days. But pair that with what Chris Smith is saying. I mean, these are people from New Jersey, right? So they're representing New Jersey, and so they're in the public eye right now, in the national spotlight. And they're going around making claims like this that are hugely incendiary and which could be used to whip up a war of fervor. So again, my point is, if we want to scold anybody for indulging in hysterics, focus your ire on these guys.